For self.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I join other parliamentarians who have expressed condolences and noted your comments made when we started this morning. But I also want to add and express congratulations to young Akim Ogis, who was selected to be on the West Indies youth team that will be going to England. I think everyone who's seen him bat will tell you he's one of the finest batsmen in the Caribbean for his age group at this present point in time. And hopefully he will continue to grow and become a West Indies senior batsman. I think never before in our history have we had so many talented young cricketers in St. Lucia. I also want to join the member from Labrie who congratulated the member from Castries Southeast for having attained his MBA. He noted, the member from Castries Southeast noted that St. Lucia has a history of producing some very bright people. And I got the impression that he was now saying he was joining an elite group of bright St. Lucians, having attained his MBA. But it was instructive, Mr. Speaker, that a few years ago, the member from Castries Office was very scornful of those who had gone through higher learning institutions. And I'm glad, and he was proud to boast that he had not gone to high schools, but he was schooled in everyday life and in common sense. And he's now added to that a prestigious title of the holder of MBA. And I certainly look forward to he and I discussing the various courses and,
so common sense has now given way.
Common sense has been lost. And it is reflected, Mr. Speaker, in his response, which he just delivered.
That's an MBA speaking.
And I would say to you, I'm sincere in my congratulations to him. I mean, I really believe when somebody has achieved such levels, we should always be congratulatory to them. But it cannot be, if the member had stood up and said, on the advice of the AG chambers, the staff there, and the AG, they do not accept the recommendations of the member from Beaufort South, I would be satisfied with that. I may not agree with him, but I would be satisfied with that the persons in the AG chambers are saying that the member from Beaufort South is wrong, and therefore stick with the approach that is being presented by the government. I would have accepted that. But to suggest that the same thing they did to me when I was in opposition, I have to do them now that we're in government, you know, I don't think is acceptable. If we're seeking, Mr. Speaker, to raise the standards, even if it may have been done before and it was wrong, then surely it should be done the right way given the opportunity. And I remember hearing the member from Beaufort South actually saying that there are other contradictions and issues, but they will arise over the years and then further amendments will be made. And he himself started off by saying that even in his experience, they've had to come back and amend bills because in the act of implementing and executing, you recognize some of the deficiencies. But, Mr. Speaker, the member for Ancillary Canneries and Minister for Tourism, or Minister in the Department responsible for tourism, presented that the amendments of this bill was necessary to improve the management of the tourism sector in St. Lucia, and that he went on to explain the rationale that the amendments would make it better, we would achieve higher levels of performance. And I took note of what he said, Mr. Speaker. And he quoted from his statement this morning as proof that the management was on course in the tourism sector. And I want to examine that context for the legislation that he presented. And I want to go directly to his statement. It's amazing that the member for Ancillary Canneries boasts of the exceptional growth in the tourism sector in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, during the debate on the budget, I had reason to point out to the honorable member that growth has been consistent in St. Lucia. In 2012, 2014, St. Lucia had the highest levels of growth in the Caribbean. Highest levels of growth. The honorable member had boasted that St. Lucia was passing the million mark for the first time. And I pointed out from the Social and Economic Review that that had been achieved for many years before. But, Mr. Speaker, the mendacity of the member is astounding, because he says things which can be easily proven, and he's not taking it from very far. In his own statement, Mr. Speaker, he points out that the growth is due to the opening and the increase in bed stock in St. Lucia. He says that in his statement. That is why we are having the growth. Not because of any better management of the tourism sector. He goes on in his same statement presented this morning that it was due to a strong rebound in the US and the world economy and reduced anxieties to a large degree about fears about Brexit. He says it himself. Of course, Mr. Speaker, he goes on to also add that better marketing. And I recall during the budget statement, I made the point, St. Lucia has appointed a social media marketing agency, and at the point of being appointed, did not have any social media presence. None. And up to the time we were debating the budget, they did not have a website. When you Google, you would see site under construction. Our social media agency, marketing agency. And on Facebook, they had 65 followers. And they only had one client, St. Lucia. And you boast, because of your social media marketing excellence, St. Lucia is doing very well. Some agency, I could check the name and come back to you on it. But also, Mr. Speaker, and that's what disturbs me sometimes about how information is presented. The member comes in and boasts that American Airlines is introducing a new flight to St. Lucia. And that shows confidence in us and how well we do it, and we are leaders in the Caribbean. But, Mr. Speaker, listen to this. American Airlines, so it's now 2 flights a day.
That's history.
You used to have 2 flights a day to St. Lucia from American Airlines. That's not new. Anyway, let's not argue, Mr. Speaker. I do not want to argue with the honourable member whether this is the first time in our history we have 2 flights a day. Let me continue with my point, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member is making the point that we have gotten a new flight from American Airlines to 2 flights a day, and that shows how we were the front runners and so much confidence in us.
Absolutely.
American Airlines has added 4 new flights from Orlando to Aruba, Cayman Islands, Nassau, and Turks and Caicos. Not 1 to St. Lucia. 4 new flights. 7 new flights from Miami. St. Lucia got 1. Port of Spain got another. Barbados got. And even St. Vincent now has gotten their very first American Airlines flight from Miami. So listen to that. 4 new flights from 1 airport. 7 from Miami. 2 new flights from Chicago. None of these came to St. Lucia. 1 new flight from Dallas to Aruba. None to St. Lucia. American Airlines has expanded its flights to the Caribbean by a total, Mr. Speaker, of 14 new flights to various destinations. St. Lucia got 1. And the honourable member is boasting of how we are the front runners because we got 1 new flight from America. From 4 airports, America has increased flights to the Caribbean islands. St. Lucia only got 1. Only 1. But he tells us that the tourism industry is so well managed.
The numbers don't lie.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, let me say to you, I am glad that there is an increase. The honorable member seems to have a difficulty in understanding simple statements. I am glad there's an increase, and I accept and acknowledge there is an increase. But there have been increases every year for the last few years. It predated he becoming Minister of Tourism. It predated him becoming Minister of Tourism. But he wants to claim that the increase is because of the excellent work that he's doing in his government. We welcome the increase. We want further increase. And we will support you to have further increase. But do not pretend that you want to, give the impression that the increase only just started. The same way, it was shocking to me, Mr. Speaker, to hear the member virtually says, for the first time we've passed 1 million. And I'm saying, but come on, I can recall years ago.
1.1 million.
Oh, now you is 1.1. But he was boasting, for the first time we've passed 1 million. And I had to point out in the budget debate, we had passed that many times. But he's now saying what he was boasting is 1.1, not 1 million. But let that pass. Let that pass. I'm a freaking joker, but Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, no, let me continue. Don't even bother to chastise him. Let me continue. Because he's a poor example of what a parliamentarian should be. But Mr. Speaker, let me continue. Let me continue. Mr. Speaker, no, don't chastise him. He will never learn. Mr. Speaker, when this government came in, Mr. Speaker, and one expects governments to change and policies to change, you expect that. You expect that. The Honorable Minister announced to this House that he was going to do an audit into the St. Lucia Tourist Board, into the financials and the operations, Mr. Speaker. To date, 2 months short of 2 years, this report has not been tabled in this Honorable House to tell us what were the shortcomings and what had been found. Still, nothing has been tabled in this House. Money paid for by the taxpayers of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, we've still not heard from the Minister any vision for tourism in St. Lucia. And the member from Castries office is fond of saying, oh, we have set up a vision commission to see where the country has to go. Now, I'm not going to debate what the vision commission is all about with the honorable member. But today, the member for Ancillary Canary says he's setting up a tourism council to outline the vision for tourism. Hear that? They chastised having a vision committee, or whatever it was called, but now he's going to tout that there's going to be a tourism council that is going to outline the policy, not the government outlining policy, not cabinet, but a tourism council. Now, I grew up in an experience of consultation and stakeholders' involvement. That's what I learned, so I would certainly applaud a tourism council. I would never decry it. I would never decry it. But it just shows you, Mr. Speaker, the warped thinking that exists. You can criticize a vision committee, but you would praise having a tourism council. Mr. Speaker, sometimes, and you've heard it said many times by other people, some things are conspicuous by its absence. That when certain things are not said, it really tells you that there's something worth wondering about it. And I would have expected the minister in his statement this morning to tell us about the Jazz Festival. It was 2 weeks ago, that you came here and presented a minister's statement about the performance of the tourism sector. If you are presenting today a statement on the performance of the tourism sector, why is there nothing about the Jazz Festival, which is supposed to be the premier festival in St. Lucia? Why is there nothing about Soleil? We've had 2 Soleil festivals so far for the year. One in January, where millions of dollars were spent, and the Jazz Festival. And we've heard nothing, Mr. Speaker. Why is the Honorable Minister not saying anything about the festivals? The Soleil has set. Last year there was and last year, Mr. Speaker, I said I was prepared to give the Soleil festival a chance. It is something new, something different. And when I said to some of my friends told me I'm a madman to say that because they saw that sun would never rise. But I wanted to give a chance because I believe it will be something new, maybe something really dynamic and whatever else. But we got no report on it last year. And what really disturbed me is the minister came into this honorable house, presented a report on the performance of the tourism industry, and did not make one reference to the jazz festival. In fact, a guy was teasing me that the government gave away VIP comps, and guys were outside the gate at Pigeon Point selling them, and people were not even buying them. Cheap. Could I get comps cheap? In fact, I had a friend of mine from Fuasho, one of my supporters, who told me, you know, he was in VIP, you know, because another supporter gave him a VIP, because he had so many given away. The same minister who came and chastised the last government saying, all the people that used to be at Pigeon Point on Mother's Day were comps Labour Party gave. Were comps, that's what they said, were comps. Today they're giving comps and people not taking it. It tells you something about what has happened to the Jazz Festival and where we are right now. But he's not reporting on it, he's keeping quiet on it. There's a lot of talk, Mr. Speaker, about Mercury beach activity. Now, I must tell you, I enjoy the Mercury beach activity. I do. I enjoy it. And I'm sure other persons in here would enjoy it. The member for Groseley would welcome it. I've seen him at Groseley while the Mercury Festival is on. I'm not sure if he even bought me a drink. He probably even bought me a drink on that Friday night. But, Mr. Speaker, I heard the member for Ancillary Canaries, the minister, say, and he can correct me if I heard wrong, that Mercury Beach brings in $7 million into St. Lucia over the weekend. And I can recall seeing for myself the impact of the Mercury Beach Festival. In Groseley, by 11 o'clock, there are no drinks available. There's no food to buy. The supermarkets are run over with French guests buying foods. No cars, you can't get a car to rent. Hobby, virtually have to close its door. You swear is the holiday sales in the US when you have to close your door and make people line up outside, because it has an impact. $7 million, the minister said. And I'm hearing popular talk that they asked for an increase for the festival to stay in St. Lucia. And the government said no. And there are other talk going around, and I think the Honorable Minister, in his statement to the House on the performance of the tourism industry, should have updated us on the Mercury activity. If you have an activity that brings $7 million in a weekend, for goodness sake, why would you not try everything you can to keep it in St. Lucia? I'm not saying there may not have been issues, I don't know, but the minister should have presented that this morning when he gave his report. Because I want the minister to tell us, and I would have loved to hear him this morning in his update, tell us about the International Soca Awards that will be held in St. Lucia. How much is the government of St. Lucia contributing to the hosting of the International Soca Awards? And when everyone talks about Dennery segment, what level of support is government really giving? What level of support to ensure the development of that art form? Yes, moral support is critical, but it takes more than that. We are about to start a carnival season, or it has started, and there are so many Calypsonians and soca artists that want to record their music. They have to pay for music sheets, and they have to record. What amount of support is government giving them? And I would love the minister to say how much is St. Lucia contributing towards the hosting of the International Soca Awards. I heard at a minimum, we're paying the flights for all the artists coming on, and we're paying the flights for all the accommodation for everyone coming on. Give us a figure. Give us a figure. Why no Mercury Beach, and why International Soca Award? And I'm not saying we should not host it in St. Lucia. And then we have to ask about CPL. How much are we contributing to CPL for 4 matches? And don't tell me Mercury Beach will not pay their bills. CPL has not paid its bill at Darren Sammy Cricket Ground yet. Monies are still owed to people. And I noted in the budget, under the Department of Youth and Sports, there was $1.7 million set aside for advertising. $1.7 million set aside for advertising. And when you read, from my recollection, when you read the details on program strategies or objectives, it said monies will be allocated, blah, 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 for the hosting of CPL and ICC Women's World Cup. So one would want to assume that the $1.7 million for advertising, something which Ministry of Youth and Sports does not regularly engage in, is towards the hosting of those two activities. I remember asking that question during the budget, but not really getting an answer. So we talk about amendments and the act and how essential it is to take the tourism industry forward. And the minister comes to give a statement this morning, and he's silent on those issues. Silent. It goes further. Hotel development. And I'm sure the Prime Minister and Representative for Miko South might say a few words after I speak. We're hearing a lot about hotel development. A lot.
So boring.
He's yawning and saying I'm so boring. Mr. Speaker, this is so juvenile, it's not funny. It's really, really juvenile. You really need to grow up, honorable member. Hotel development, Mr. Speaker. And I come back to a point that I've made over and over. The Prime Minister had announced a deal with range development, Mr. Speaker. And this is a real sore point for us. Because we were opposed to the deal which the Prime Minister had signed with range. We said so. The Prime Minister told me he will never come to me for financial advice. The member from Castries office asked me, what do you know about money? What do you know about money? We said that that was a bad deal, and the terms and conditions were illegal and unacceptable. We said so. And we gave the Prime Minister the mathematical analysis to show why it was a bad deal. Mr. Speaker, we talk about the tourism industry and expanding the room stock. The money is the $400 million we would give under CIP, $400 million under CIP we would be giving to range. I'm sure it can be spent on the education sector. I'm sure it can be spent on finishing St. Jude's. I'm sure it can be spent on financing our healthcare system in St. Lucia. And we always said that that was a bad deal. And the Prime Minister said during the budget debate, and I noted, that he will resolve all the issues with range by July, because there are some challenges, but he will assure us he will resolve everything by July. I am waiting for July to hear exactly how those issues have been resolved, because I insist it is a bad deal. $400 million of CIP money should not be given to a developer as a loan at 2% interest. And you talk about proper management of the tourism industry. And the growth that has started years ago is your evidence of how well you manage in the tourism industry. It's not. Then we heard about Fairmont. And Fairmont is a project that we had started discussions with by the time the government changed. And I want to ask, and the honorable member from Strozel is there, how many persons from Strozel are working on the site at Fairmont? How many local trucks are working there? How many local tractors are working there? And I noted that Fairmont is the only hotel development on the CIP website as an approved CIP project. Only one. There is no DSH there. There is no range there. There is Fairmont. And we need to know, Honorable Minister, when you respond to me, does Fairmont have the same deal that range got? Because the Prime Minister said he was doing away with the old, you will not respond. The kind of disrespect. You're in Parliament, questions have been asked, and you're saying you will not respond. But let's proceed. The people of St. Lucia at least can hear I'm asking the questions. If you're saying to me, Fairmont, the Prime Minister said he's doing away with the real estate approach that was used in the past and by other countries, and his new approach is to give loans from the donation at 2% interest, has Fairmont been given the same deal? And if so, how many more hundreds of millions of dollars from CIP monies will be given to another developer at 2% interest? And you talk about the proper management of the tourism industry. And then a few days ago, we heard, or I saw, because I saw it, I read it, a new development for canals with the Galaxy Group. And I'm not going to say much today, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to wait for more information from the Prime Minister, from the Minister of Tourism, about the Galaxy development at Canals. Because sometimes I wonder, and I noted in the photo, the AG was there at the signing ceremony. I also saw the Prime Minister's personal lawyer, Mr. Mark Maraj, was there at the signing ceremony, whatnot. And I'm waiting for the details to come out, because it will come out. And I asked all St. Lucians to go and do their research on Galaxy and the hotel development in St. Kitts. I will say no more at this point, Mr. Speaker. But again, we speak of the proper management of the tourism sector and how it is taking off because of the excellent work of the government. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to raise a few issues, and I think the member from Beaufort South has already raised them, so I will not care to repeat them, except to say, Mr. Speaker, that for my part, I believe, and I think I said so to you during your visit to my parliamentary office, I have a difficulty with bills being brought to this House and having to go through all the sittings one time. I have a difficulty with that. All the stages at one time. I have a difficulty with this. There's a reason why you have 3 different stages, Mr. Speaker. I just come. If it was done before, it is wrong. There may be instances where you have to do that. The last time we discussed this bill, well, it's now Act, in June last year, I raised some of the points the member from Beaufort South raised.
You did?
Yes, and I was shunned for raising it. When we went to committee stage, I raised it again. But if, Mr. Speaker, the bill had gone through its first reading, it had been put out for public discourse and discussion, maybe there would have been greater reflection on some of those issues. And we really must stop this practice of every single bill that comes to this House has to go through all 3 stages right away. I understand, and I make the point, there may be circumstances where you would want to do that, but that should not become the norm of business in this House, Mr. Speaker. That's my personal view, and I appeal to you as the presiding officer to dissuade the other side from continuing to do work in such a manner. So, Mr. Speaker, I await the response of the member from Ancillary Canaries. He boasts that all the successes in tourism now is because of his fantastic work. I, like most St. Lucians, want to see a very successful tourism industry. We want to see more persons benefit from it. I know I have constituents in Marigot who keep saying to me they feel slighted. And they tell me every now and then they see the honorable member from Ancillary driving past with his glass up but not stopping. But he would appreciate, Mr. Speaker, that Marigot is a very important place in St. Lucia, one of the most scenic places, and it's a bay. There needs to be some attention given to Marigot. So when he speaks about proper management of the tourism industry, Marigot should not continue to be neglected. And I'm looking forward to the details on the community tourism, because I heard there were a couple of meetings in Marigot by certain operatives already discussing who's going to get what and what's going to happen. And Mr. Speaker, before I end, I must say something about Banan. Mr. Speaker, it is really sad, the quality and the nature of the discourse that takes place in this country. And I made a simple point when constituents called me to ask me what was going on. They wanted some explanation. I made calls. I was virtually told it's not my business. I wrote to the Prime Minister, I wrote to SLASPA and a couple of other agencies, saying at least just consult the people and inform them as to what the plans are. Not that you should not do it. During the election campaign, I was one advocating the redevelopment of the area. But people have anxieties. There are families living there. There are children living there. There are elderly people living there. There are fishers there. They have business people there. You may not like some of their business, but they have businesses there. Just engage them and speak to them. And for someone to tell me, by asking for a dialogue with the people who will be affected by any development, is playing petty politics. Mr. Speaker, for the record, I support the redevelopment of the area. But can you please ask the responsible agencies to engage individuals who would be affected, who live there? And the last time the work started, I was across the road with some of the residents, The Prime Minister was having lunch across the road at Haddishead. He could have walked across the road and just have a few words with the people. I mean, I would have joined him and I may have asked him a couple of questions, you know. But he could have done it, but he did not. And you know what that does, Mr. Speaker? You know what that does? And all of us who are St. Lucians, and we can appreciate that, is we and them. When people believe that the Prime Minister, they've asked for consultation, and they see the Prime Minister across the road, and he would not even come across and give them information, simple information that they're asking for. When they see works are taking place, nobody wants to engage them. What does that do? What does that do to them and how they feel about their country, how they feel about their government, how they feel about their own social existence? It makes them feel that they are not worthy citizens in St. Lucia, that they are second class in this land. That's what it does. It does not take a lot to cross the road and have a simple conversation. It does not take a lot for SLASPA to have a meeting with them, for CCC to have a meeting with them. They are human beings too. And that's all we've been asking for. And I heard the member, the minister for local government, you know, talking about how Hilaire not doing anything for his constituency. Well, those things will always be said, and I'm sure they will be resolved in time to come. But I believe when we speak about tourism development, and if this area is going to be developed for tourism development, Honorable Minister, come and have a meeting with the people. Talk to them. Reduce the anxieties. It does not take much. Be a little more humble. Reduce the arrogance. And just step across the road and have a conversation with the people. They deserve it. They are citizens too. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.